A few years ago, my friend Rita said to me, come on, let's go out, let's grab a drink, let's head over to Bar Raval. I was like, what's Bar Raval? Never heard of the place. She's like, haven't you heard? It's like this brand new restaurant, bar. Everyone's talking about it. It's got so much buzz. It's right downtown Toronto. You got to go. So we go to this bar. It's late. It's Friday. It's dark. It's loud. And we go into this place and she's like, everyone's talking about it because the inside is like this hundreds of thousands of dollars, like mahogany masterpiece with all this like curved, crazy wood inspired by Gaudí. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, just come in and you'll see. So we go in, it's packed, it's busy. We get in, and sure enough, like the walls, the ceiling, the roof of this place are all like these weird, intricate, curved wood patterns. You kind of feel like you're in like some Ewok village type of thing. And so we kind of squeeze up to the bar, and we get up there, and I look at the guy, and there's this guy behind the counter, and he looks at me, and he's got kind of thick glasses. He's got like, he's fully tattooed, his arms, his fingers, his neck, and he's got kind of short cropped red hair, and he looks at me, and I look at him, and I'm like, can I grab a drink? And he's like, what do you want? And I'm like, can I just get a drink? You have a menu? He's like, well, yeah, but what do you want? And I was like, I don't know. What do you got? And he's like, no, what do you want? And I'm like, kind of a bit stunned. You know, I'm with my friend, and I'm like, I'm trying to order a drink, and he's just like not letting me. And so I'm just like, I don't know. I don't want something sweet. You know, I don't want something sweet. And he kind of does this like slow 360-degree kind of swivel where he slowly turns behind him, stares at this gigantic wall full of glass bottles, tinctures, potions, all these colorful liquids, then swivels back to me, stares me right in the eye, and with like this sort of tongue-in-cheek, but like this ferocious intensity, he's like, does it look like a fucking sweet place to you? And I'm taken aback. I mean, this guy's swearing at me. I mean, I'm just trying to get a drink. You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know how to, what are you telling me, sir? I'm like, tell me what, I just want a drink. How do I get a drink? He's like, you tell me what you want. And I was like, well, I don't know what you have. He's like, tell me what you want. There's no such thing as a sweet drink. Every single drink in this whole menu is balanced. It's this way, is that way. You know, it's not just like, you can't just say not sweet. You have to tell me what you want, what you feel like, what you want to, what kind of night you want to have. And I'm like, okay, buddy, you want to throw it down like that? All right, I'll throw it down like that. And so Rita's looking at me. I'm just like, okay, here's what I want. I want to have a fun night. I want to have an energized night. I want to be up a little bit. You know, Rita is the woman that introduced Leslie and I, my wife, my beautiful wife. So I get to see her maybe once a year. It's a rare night for us. There's some nostalgia. We're talking about when we used to live in the same apartment building. So I want some nostalgia. I want some refreshment. I want some energy. I want some optimism. I want to feel good. I want to feel up. What do you got for that? And he looks at me in the eyes and he's like, no one does that. And that's exactly what every single person should be doing. And I'm like, okay. And so I watch him, and literally for the next 5 minutes, he proceeds to like essentially do like this wizard magic trick where he's taking different colored and different sized like glass jars out of the fridge. He's like shaving lemons and limes. He's like pounding ice cubes with a big stick. He's like swiveling all kinds of stuff, mixing it together. He's setting it up on like this little kind of drinks counter that has like has like lights underneath it. So it looks like this glowing, bright green fuzz, like kind of fizzling tincture. And he hands it over to me. It looks like no drink I've ever experienced before. I take a sip, and my first thought was, holy crap, this guy literally just gave me every single adjective that I said. This drink does taste energizing. It does taste refreshing. It does taste optimistic. It does taste a bit nostalgic. I'm like, how did he do that? Like, am I just making this up in my head? But sure enough, Rita starts to order a drink by adjective too, and I get to know this guy behind the counter a little bit, this challenging bartender. Turns out he's not just a challenging bartender. His name is Robin Goodfellow. He's also the owner, together with a couple other guys, of the bar, Bar Raval. He's the founder of a Little Bones beverage company. He also partly owns Pretty Ugly in Toronto, Harry's in Toronto. He's got a lot of new projects on the go. He's been bartending for 16 years. He's always talking about chains. He's always talking about evolution. He's like training new bartenders. And guess what? Bar Raval was named the #1 bar in the country. Pretty Ugly, his other bar, was named number 8. And Bar Raval was also currently number 70 on the best bars in the world list. Is Robin Goodfellow the world's best bartender? I mean, he is to me. He is to me, right? Unlike Chapter 7 with the Vishwas Agrawal, we don't have the 4.99 rating here because you don't really rate a bartender. But since that time, I have become addicted to Bar Raval. I take friends there. We always order by adjective because it's not just about adjective, it's about agency. And in this chapter with Robin Goodfellow on the patio of Bar Raval, with the sun beaming over us on a weekday morning, you can hear the streetcars going by, you'll hear people in skateboards going by, cars honking, Robin putting his saucer on top of his coffee mug as he's trying to keep it hot while we chat. We're going to get into it. We are going to get into Robin Goodfellow's 3 most formative books because that's what you're listening to, people. You are listening to 3 books where we are on an epic 15-year quest to uncover and discuss the world's 1,000 most formative books. And how do we do that? We are reaching out to 333 of the world's most inspiring people who are working with all their heart, all their might, all their love to put something beautiful out into the world. We are sitting down with them when we were asking them which 3 books most shaped their lives. We started this journey on March 31st, 2018. We're going all the way up to September 1st, 2031. On the exact minute of every single new moon and every single full moon, we will drop a new chapter of our Best of 2018 award-winning show, 3 books, right in your lap. So, like I said, this chapter is done right at Bar Raval. Toronto Life says, intricate Antoni Gaudí-inspired woodwork melts mahogany into swooping curves with a few right angles in sight, making the bar feel like a warm and super stylish grotto. The themes we explore are what is the purpose of a bar? It's not just to get a drink, that's the thing. There's something else happening there. There's something else that we want, that we're looking for. That in this era of loneliness and separation and sort of like all these, this anxiety kind of filled world we live in, what are we looking for? And how do we find it in a bar that kind of connects us to our local community? What underpins all great service? What shouldn't bosses tell employees? How do we learn to be more mindful eaters? What's the paradox between authenticity and quality? That is a fascinating conversation. And this was funny. Why is the farm to table movement completely over? This is one of my favorite conversations. I mean, how often do you go from like getting scolded by a bartender to like having him on your podcast? But there's something special about Robin. He speaks with a ferocious intensity. He's got over 8 years of university education in social theory, and he's running bars that are changing the way we drink and we consume and we interact. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show on chapter 27, Mr. Robin Goodfellow. Let's go. Are you ready to go?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Robin.
Hey.
Go ahead, take a sip of your coffee. It's funny drinking a coffee at a bar.
Well, we're open early.
Yeah, why are you guys open early? So can you place us? Can you give because this is a listener thing, right? People can't see where we are. Can you place us mentally?
So we're at Bar Raval, which is a small little tapas pincho cocktail bar at College in Palmerston in Toronto. We opened it just over 4 years ago, and at the time we were designing it and opening it, I was slowly becoming a huge coffee nerd, and we knew we wanted to do daytime to some extent. And then when we nailed down one of the top coffee consultants in the area, we realized that we could be open early, like at 8 a.m. for coffee. So we thought we'd, open up as like a little takeout spot early in the day. And then as people trickled in, had a quick lunch, and then, started to go pretty heavy in the evening. And then we'd for sure do late night because my 2 partners came from Bar Isabel and I was a bar guy all over the city. Specifically had just come from Ursa doing like kind of fancy stuff. So we knew we would do the late night.
So, and you're being humble also because this place is winning tons of awards. You have top 50, top 100 bars in the world. It's my favorite bar in the city. I met Vishwas Agrawal, who was Chapter 7's guest, the world's greatest Uber driver, when I came out of this place. And you gave a great description of like how you guys got into the passion here, but like also like what is up with this like Gaudi-esque, crazy, ridiculous wood carvings coating all the walls and ceilings? What is up with the design of this place? Can you first of all describe it, and then also why did you design it this way?
So we designed the inside this way because we knew we wanted to go with a Spanish theme. Well, first we wanted a cocktail bar, and then we realized there was limited space for what we wanted to do, the small kitchen, the small bar, and the small space. If we had done tables and reservations, we probably wouldn't have made a dime back. So we figured, they do this all over Spain, in San Sebastian, Barcelona, Seville, where you walk in and you find a space and you damned well, grab onto any ledge you can and you eat some of the best food imaginable and drink some of the best wine imaginable. And it's insanely cheap and fun and high energy, and you bounce and you don't know what the hell happened. So we figured in this space we could do that, but also in a more Canadian Toronto setting. And Torontonians love design, and we loved what Partisans were doing. So we decided that it'd be funny to pay homage to one of the most famous architects known to man, and that's Antoni Gaudí, who's a huge inspiration to us all. So we designed essentially a Spanish-style pincho bar that focuses on cocktails rather than just wine, inspired by Antonio Gaudí at the prestigious corner of College and Palmerston.
That's amazing. By the way, what's a pincho?
Pincho is a little snack. It's like a San Sebastian's version of tapas, but it means spike. So usually they put a little kind of unique 4 to 5 ingredient dish on a piece of bread with a skewer. So you've seen them here.
Yeah, of course.
They're on the bar right now, and that's like in San Sebastian. You literally pick off the bar, and they charge you based on the pinchos, on the spikes or the toothpicks are different colors and they're different prices.
And versus a tapas, how do you define tapas?
I don't 100% know, but it's just small
plates.
sharing plates. It doesn't necessarily mean small, because sometimes tapas can be a large plate, but it's just shared dishes. Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you, Robin, first of all, how much, this place has made me a better drinker and a better eater. You've challenged me personally.
Sorry.
And to grow, and you said cocktail bar, and my first question was this is the only bar I've ever been to where, in a way, the people challenge you to order by how you feel, like adjectives. When I come in, I'm like, I want to feel optimistic. I want to feel refreshed. I want to feel, confident. And then literally they will make me a drink that will make me feel optimistic, refreshed, and how does that even happen here? Why does that happen? That sounds probably strange to people that don't order by adjective normally.
Well, there wasn't really anything like Raval when we had opened, and now it's sort of set a standard, and it's fun to keep progressing, and people look to us, so I hear, as like a beacon, and it's nice to be on all those lists and all getting all these awards and stuff like that. But we just like being creative with how we treat people. You go into a bar and you're seeking something. You're not necessarily seeking a gin-based cocktail with certain ingredients, although that's kind of what you've been trained to think. A lot of my staff get offended when someone's, hey, you, but I try to explain to them that, maybe they frequent bars where that's the only way to get the bartender's attention. That's not their fault. And then you have people who come into a bar and say, I want something not too sweet. It's the first thing, and bartenders get offended by that. But let's be real. There's a gauntlet of overpriced sugary drinks out there that they're trying to avoid. So really what the guests want is what they want, and they just haven't given the openness and the freedom to just express what they want. And I know you referenced the first time I served you, but I was encouraging you to express what you want and how you want, and it wasn't just ingredients. Don't tell me I like rum, I like gin, no.
Because what does it even mean?
That's right. You want to be refreshed, and I like to use stuff when I am behind the bar, which is rare. Do you want something cozy like a fireplace, or something refreshing like a beach? And that kind of nails it down. Do you feel beachy or do you feel fireplacey?
Yeah.
Two very valid moods. Extremely different moods.
Totally.
But that's something a bartender should and can be able to accomplish
can
with
I
a conversation.
Yeah. So, and I've had, bartenders here are also amazing and impressive, no wonder, because they're training under the master. And I've had bartenders here tell me what your favorite childhood TV show is, these bizarre kind of elements of your personality to make you a drink. So if I said I was beachy versus I was feeling cozy like a fireplace, tell me, what is that? What that goes into your brain?
Oh yeah.
What do you do now?
If you say fireplace, and your favorite TV show growing up was Doctor Who, I'm gonna give you something serious and weird. And,
what?
Like boozy. We have a lot of fun back there. Let
me go into your brain a tiny bit though. So
it would it would most likely be something stirred, large cube, with some sort of element of a weird tincture we have. I know I probably would grab our frankincense tincture. So I'd give you a surprising flavor with one of our weird techniques that exists in an already recognizable drink. So maybe a Manhattan or a Bijou variation with some sort of weird, unique element. But if you said beachy and your favorite...
Wait. What is frankincense tincture?
It's something that I worked on many years ago with the thought in mind that I want to use ingredients that can strike memories and that you typically wouldn't find in drinks. You know, like it's, again, a lot of people, and we're going to get into the books, and I'm pretty sure these 3 books did this to me. Whereas, you know, if most people try to become a good bartender, they usually look to other people who do that profession and take the everyday skills that they possess and try to mimic them and then maybe enhance them. Whereas I like to find inspiration from completely outside my industry. So if I want to strike a memory when I serve you a
Cozy
drink,
Doctor Who. Keep going with it.
I think if I do something with frankincense, it can, you know, potentially remind you of the last time you went to church, which could have been a really bad or a really good memory.
Interesting. But what is frankincense tincture, though?
It's so frankincense.
You made it up,
Yeah, it's
obviously.
a resin that it was really tricky to work with because it's not fat. It's not.
Sorry, is it actually with frankincense?
Yeah. And
I didn't I thought that was just the name of it.
No. I literally take a small amount of frankincense, torch it, and infuse it into an extremely high proof spirit, and then we literally just do a few drops per drink, and it's overwhelmingly powerful.
The metal.
Yeah, and
where do you buy this metal?
No, it's a resin. It's
edible.
Yeah,
I'm drinking.
It's edible in very small quantities. Yeah, and that's how we
see.
do
This
it.
is what I'm talking about.
Microscopic level frankincense done the right way can set off a cocktail, and just so you're aware, it does work because our #1 selling cocktail of all time at Raval is the Choc Fresco, which is the drink that this was made for.
Okay, wait. Why large cube? You said you'd go large cube if somebody wanted cozy.
Cozy because there's something
and
just
large
nice
cube, by the way, for those
yeah.
that don't know what I'm talking about, you guys have an ice cube here that's like
just big,
the size of bigger than a golf ball, right?
Yeah.
So why would you go? What does that mean?
Something
cozy?
about holding it makes you feel like you're at a fire. You know, where you see like someone in like all those movies. You know, Masterpiece Theater. They're holding like a thing of whiskey with like 1 cube in it. It's kind of it has that coziness element to it. You know, like whereas if you get a lot of ice in a drink, like packed to the gills, you're thinking beachy, you know, Mai Tai.
So let me go this way. I'm like, okay, I feel beachy. It's spring, almost spring. I really want to feel warm. And my favorite TV show as a kid was like, I'm like Growing Pains. I'm like, I grew up I'm talking about myself here. I grew up in Oshawa. I'm like,
I was hoping you'd say Simpsons, but Growing Pains?
Okay,
yeah,
or throw Simpsons in there.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get into your brain because your brain is so interesting. And that's why I wanted you on 3 books. So now give me the beach
if
Simpsons
it was Growing
drink.
Pains, I'd probably make it something a little more waspy. But if it was
like what?
I don't know. Like
tell me.
Yeah, maybe like something with rum, like a ginger, like a dark and stormy with some cool element to it. But if you were saying I want something beachy and my favorite show is The Simpsons, I'd for sure give you something tropical light and I'd set it on fire. You know, I'd give you like a
Flaming
Mo or something like it, right? And you'd have a great laugh. And
Yeah.
to be honest, the drink could taste like crap, but you'd still love it because it's there. So that's the point. Is you gotta. What we do here is we open people's minds and try to take them out of their everyday life or their typical bar experience, which the whole CNC crazy mahogany wood here is supposed to do.
What's CNC?
See, I don't know. Computer.
Oh, it's a super fancy wood. Someone
how
told
they
me
cut
maybe
it.
it was you that you guys dropped like a crazy. I don't want to put numbers in your mouth, but you spent
it's
the amount of
not
money you
cheap.
spent on just the wood alone. I think I read it about an Architecture Digest. They did a cover story about you guys. It was like $250,000 or $500,000 just on pieces of wood.
Yeah.
You told me before you guys opened that you ripped down the whole bar because it was 1 inch too big near the front door. Remember, like.
Yeah. Well, it had to be right. So we're standing on the patio right now, and people starting to pile in inside, even though it's morning. We took 9 months from getting the keys to first day open because we're 3 broke ass guys, and this is all we had. But yeah, the day we decided that it had to be mahogany, like we went through tests with foam and plywood and stains and stuff like that, and it had to be mahogany. So when it showed up in January, and we already had all of our staff quit their jobs and they were waiting for us. These 2 ledges here were 1 inch too thick, which basically meant that...
So you're pointing out these giant wooden mahogany ledges just to our left that are super weird and twisted and curvy besides
completely
like
custom,
Gaudí.
and like the ledges are based on people's elbows leaning into them, which we leaned into foam and stuff like that. But they basically span between inside and outside. So we wanted that ability, if the windows were open, for people to interact across. But 2 more inches is just too far. So we lose that ability entirely. So we had the choice to open up right then and there or wait 3 more weeks for this wood to get fixed. And we sent it back, and it was heart crushing and soul stomping because we're paying people with money we barely had. You know, we opened February 14th, 2015, and I had $27 on my account. But we knew it was the right move, and it was the right move because I don't know if I could change a single thing about this place. It's a pretty big home run, like, which,
well, you guys are, sorry, just to say, you guys are packed morning till night, 7 days a week.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we definitely were that first year, and now it's kind of calmed down because I think people don't like coming when it's that packed. But no, we've smoothed out, which is what happens in your 5th year. But no, it's still very busy, and we're very fortunate to have so many, lovely customers. Obviously, patio is insane because we have we go from 41 people inside to 96 when all the patios are open and it's hot. But we wouldn't be as fun if those ledges right there were 2 inches wider, so it took a lot of guts, but we knew we had to stick to that.
I love this, Robin. I could listen to you all day. I love the attention to craft, the attention to detail, the idea of making things perfect. We certainly tried for that on 3 books. We composed the music. We hired a composer. We had 10 different versions of the theme song. We really went through all this stuff because we care so much about getting the show perfect. You said something just a few minutes ago I want to touch on before jumping into your books. You said when people come to the bar, they have a desire or a goal. So I was going to ask you, just at a high level, what's the point of a bar? What is the purpose of a bar in someone's life? What role does it fill?
You know what? There's definitely, and more importantly, there's no one answer to that. And that's I think the big reality that a lot of people don't understand is a lot of restaurants and bars try to curate an experience based on what they would want. And then when the guest doesn't vibe with their reality or their ideology, they get pissed or they make excuses, and then businesses go out of business, and because it's not the restaurant do what you want, it's the restaurant business, and you got to do what the guests want, and guests are all very different. So what they do want is they want a third space that's not work, it's not home, it's something else, where they get to interact with people they may or may not know in a safe, fun environment. And now
to what end?
Yeah, now it's 2019, so it's not like the whole sweet drink thing and what was Toronto like at 2015 when we opened, or 2014 when we started the concept, versus now is different because Raval is open. So what people want is different because the cocktail renaissance, in my opinion, is over. You can get a good drink in so many places. So now what? Instead of just seeking out a good meal or a good drink and suffering through pretentious bartenders and chefs, now what you look for is a place worthy of your dollars, a place worthy of your experience, a place worthy of your time, a place worthy of your conversation. And that's how, restaurant operators or bar operators should be thinking, is are we worthy for our guests? Do we care more about them than we care about ourselves? And that's what we do.
I love that. I've talked, some of the bartenders here have told me that what you guys are trained to do here is look for the agency and kind of curate a specific guest experience to everyone that walks in the door without knowing what they want. So you're looking at body language, you're looking at posture, you're looking at who they're with, what they're wearing, and then you're trying to figure out whether they want to spend $8 on a coffee or $800 to celebrate a big deal going through at an investment bank, and give them exactly that goal. But that's so hard to do for a place.
Yeah, it's hard to do for a place. It's even harder to have people admit to making a mistake. So my really good servers and my really good bartenders are the ones who, in the middle of trying to curate your evening that night, you might show up alone and have the best time 10 times out of 10, but you might show up with someone else and have another amazing time. But you might show up with a completely new person and might have a terrible time. My good servers and my good bartenders will understand that what Neil loves traditionally or typically is not what that's needed for that time. And although we sent something out or took a something upon ourselves and it didn't hit well, the apology and the no harm no foul and the mistake and oh my god, I'm so sorry, I was that is also enjoyable. To know that your restaurant or your bar or this third space actually cares more about you than the experience that they're trying to curate, or their ego, more importantly. There is no loser.
What are some examples of people that walk in the door because I'm just me. I'm going to tell the listener of this show how, and by the way, I'm on point with you with third space. The reason I was testing their mics before is because I record this in a 2-ear format. So when people listen to this, you and me are in different ears, so they can feel like they're in the middle.
Oh, nice.
Right? So I do stuff like that too. Maybe I learned it from you. But give me some examples of people that walk in the door and how different you guys might act or behave or curate for people.
Yeah. So I mean,
Like-
it even the same. Like I said, we might have to curate your experience.
That was pretty interesting,
multiple
yeah.
different times,
Yeah.
depending on who
I
you're
mean,
with.
I brought my wife's grandparents here at lunch.
Yeah.
I've
So
come
we're
here at
not,
night. Yeah.
you know, we had to realize we're not anniversary dinner place, but we are very much date place. Part of the concept of this place was, you know, for people who like high energy in a spot, because there are certain grandparents or, you know, elderly people who love it. My mom, she has 2 fake hips and loves coming in here and standing. Or some people, you know, they won't. They'll shake their head if they don't get a stool right away. Like it's all it.
That's the other thing.
We
about
love it
here,
all.
No chairs.
Yeah,
We didn't even talk about the no chairs thing.
We love it all, and we're not trying to wrestle people into our concept. No one will greet you at Raval being like, "Welcome to our standing only pincho bar." Like, no, that's not a thing. It's just a space that's fun, and it is whatever you want to make it. So we get all kinds of walks of life in here. Some people, you know, only come in the summer, winter, but we have moments when, you know, we're serving anyone to realize whether they're gonna enjoy sarcastic, funny humor service, or, you know, we fuck off and let them just have proper, finer, like a more refined service.
Right.
And that is literally the art of it. I don't believe in training sequence of service. We have best practices, you know, and our staff knows that if someone's going to enjoy fun and funniness, then, you know, give it your best shot. If someone's going to enjoy propriety, don't crack jokes if they're like, you know, there for a serious time. We get people coming in, you know, like dressed like me, which is not too great, and then we have people who are like, you know, ball out and they're gonna all enjoy the space the same and interact. And, you know, this place is kind of a catalyst or lubricant for many different walks of life to enjoy the same thing, which
And to meet each other.
Yeah, and what do people want? And I got to be honest, like the best way to describe it is people want to get what they want.
Ooh, interesting. People want to get what they want. Yeah. Can we order a couple pinchos?
Sure.
So before we jump into the books, can we have a couple? Because I just finally learned what the meaning of the word pincho was.
Yeah.
Can we get your two or three
Sure.
favorite pinchos? Which
Let's
one's
do the grilled mussels because they're literally served with a spike through them. Do you have any allergies?
No, I'll eat whatever.
You eat whatever?
Yeah, I mean, that's
Are you going to pretend like you've never had these before?
I have never had the grilled mussels
Okay,
before.
great.
I don't know
I was going
what.
to say the tuna pickle gilda too, but it might not be good for recording because it's quite juicy. But it's definitely good to talk about. Why don't we do grilled mussels, tuna pickle gilda, and there's gluten-free bread around? Okay, well, we don't know. Sorry, because I'm celiac. We just started carrying gluten-free bread after 4 years, but we have delicious. Do you eat bread?
I eat gluten.
Okay. So I don't know.
You can get yours on a potato chip.
You gotta get the a 1-piece tomato bread and 1-piece kitchen bread, and then sure, and then those are good little pinchos to talk about.
Okay, great. I love it. I love that you ordered because you ordered like tons of stuff I've never had before.
Great.
Obviously, the other interesting thing about your menu is that I've heard that whenever something gets too popular, you guys remove it from the menu.
No, that's not true.
It's not. Well, it's always changing.
It's
Okay,
about, yeah.
Can we jump into your books? By the way, I could talk to you about this bar forever. I'm so fascinated by it. I love the fact that to my right is this tiny little wood carved napkin and toothpick holder that says Bar Raval. The toothpicks are like no toothpick I've ever seen anywhere else. They're like small little ovals. You told me you bought a skid of them at some
when we first
store in Chinatown.
No one carried them when we first opened.
But more interestingly to me is that like literally I'll be in the middle of a meal here and somebody will come by and just replace the entire like giant wood napkin holder. And I just say to them, why didn't you just stuff in more napkins? And they said, that's not clean.
Yeah.
Like they were like you guys do so much. It's not what?
Soigné.
What's that word?
I don't know. It's like a French restaurant slang for like
that might be the
extra
word.
Nice, extra
that
awesome.
might be the word of the podcast.
Yeah, soigné.
Soigné. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to ask you how to spell that later. Are you good with jumping into your books? I'm curious
Sure.
what made this bar, and what made this bar is Robin Goodfellow, and what made Robin Goodfellow is partly these 3 most formative books.
Okay.
The first one being, and so I'll do a 30-second overview, and then I'll ask you to tell us about your relationship with it. So the first one is The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, the first ever comic book to appear on the 3 Books Top 1000 by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, published by Marvel in 1963. Stan Lee was the author. He lived from 1922 to 2018. Just last year, he died. Born in New York, died in LA at age 95. Stan Lee was an American comic book writer, editor, publisher, and producer. He rose through the ranks of a family-run business to become Marvel Comics' primary creative leader for 2 decades, leading its expansion from small division of a publishing house to multimedia giant that dominated the comics industry. He's famous for giving his superheroes a flawed humanity, a change from the idealistically perfect people with no serious problems. So Stan Lee introduced people like Spider-Man, complex, naturalistic characters who have bad tempers, fits of melancholy, vanity, and bickering, worrying about their bills and impressing girlfriends, and sometimes even getting physically ill. The cover is a bright red curved font saying The Amazing Spider-Man, with Spider-Man trapped in a giant glass tube as other characters look up from the ground. Guys, file this in Dewey Decimal at 741.5 under comic books, graphic novels, and comic strips. I do not have this book with me. I failed to obtain and get it. I think that is going to be part of the story. So, Robin, please tell us about your relationship with The Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 1 by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko.
The irony is that if you could obtain a copy of this book, or I could bring you one, it wouldn't be on my list of 3. The fact that neither of us have access to it is why it's on my list of 3.
I can't wait to hear why.
My dad had a copy. My dad had the first 10 Spider-Man issues growing up. And the only reason why I know this is because, late enough into my life where I can still start to form memories, he was complaining about how my grandmother threw all of his comic books out when he was a young kid. He went to go work up north for a summer and came home, and his collection of the first 10 first edition Spider-Man comics had been thrown out by my lovely grandmother, Ruth Goodfellow, rest in peace. And it was just funny growing up listening to the story.
We should say these things are worth millions.
So he would complain, and this is like early 90s, late 80s when he would complain to me about it. I don't remember why it came up. I just remember these conversations being frequent. How old were you at the time? Yeah, like 7, 8, 9.
Right.
Like young.
Yeah.
But then it would also go into later in life where it would just always come up. Fucking grandmother, your fucking grandmother. Like, I can't believe every time he'd see a Spider-Man ad or anything, he'd bring it up and he'd be sour about it, which it was funny. It's like this book kept coming up, and then there was some sort of connection with me and my dad then developed this like little inside joke about Marvel, and Marvel became a part of our lives. It was like the safety zone I had with my dad, but it was also like him teaming up with me against his own mother. But like, she also didn't know. She was just trying to like get him to mature and grow up. But the reality is from her world, comic books and bright colors weren't worth keeping. But at the time in the early 90s, late 80s, I'm going to say actually probably early 90s. I don't know if I remember much of the 80s, but it was worth like $100,000. Like the first one was like $100,000, and the next 9 were like maybe the same, like another 50. But the first one, this one was worth like, a fortune, like more money than he had in his bank at the time. And she just tossed it. So it was funny. And then
how did it create a safe space with you and him? The Marvel thing. Open that up for me a bit.
It was weird. It was just like, your father, your parents are these figures of authority, but for some reason, when your father jokes about how shitty his mother was, in not a serious way, obviously he doesn't have any like ill feelings towards her because of it, but it just sort of humanized him and then also humanized her. So it was an early memory I have of understanding that my parents and my grandparents were just people. So,
what Stan Lee did with the Spider-Man himself.
Yeah, I mean, and then like the more, and it speaking of Spider-Man, I think that kid dresses as Spider-Man sometimes.
Oh yeah, there's a guy skateboarding right outside, and in Toronto, there's this guy who famously rides his skateboard down the street dressed as Spider-Man.
Pretty sure that was him. Yeah,
he just wasn't in his costume there,
yeah.
But he does tricks on his skateboard, and my kids like stop and take pictures of him.
Yeah,
that was kind of apropos.
So then as I spend more time reading and not doing my schoolwork and whatnot and getting into Marvel, I was collecting all the cards and then find out that my dad's cousin, Paul Soules, was the actual voice of Spider-Man on the TV show, the first cartoon.
Wow.
So my family starts developing, or at least I start having a connection with Marvel Comics, and Stan Lee and Spider-Man in particular. Like Spider-Man to me was always the main Marvel story.
That's how you can identify him even out of costume.
Yeah.
And he just skateboarded by us.
Oh yeah. The first time I biked by a guy in a Spider-Man costume, I had this weird visceral vibration about like, what the hell, like I had a spidey sense. I was like, what the hell is happening? Like, am I having a stroke? Did someone slip me LSD? Oh no, it's actually a guy in a Spider-Man costume, but he like plays it so well. But yeah, like there was this connection with my dad and my grandma and then my cousins, and I was like, oh shit, like these stories, there must be something real to them. And I started to read them and pay attention to them as like a philosophy, not just a, fun fake story of, mystical beings and strange powers as if I wanted to be one. It was just kind of something that removed the fourth wall to life.
Ooh,
And you saw
interesting.
behind the scenes, and I basically exposed my dad, and I started to think about his childhood and things. I started to think about things from his perspective at that moment. I don't really know how to describe it other than him describing his loss of his comic books about his grandmother opened up my brain. It kind of unlocked my brain to thinking about the subjective, and like I started to put my brain into other people's brains and look through other people's eyes, and that sort of stuck with me. So then as a young kid, that is an interesting thing to I mean, like, it's an interesting epiphany to have where, you are not the world. You are not all that matters. And, your father had a life before you, and now and all these things are intertwined and, completely unable to be isolated. And it sounds like a really weird thing a kid should have when, you talk about throwing out comics, but that's what it did for me.
Well, that's amazing too, because there's this famous line or quote I heard somewhere, maybe it was on Reddit or something, saying, when you grow up, you forget that you're also watching your parents grow up too.
Totally. And you don't realize that. But I was fortunate to have a really nice upbringing, and my dad was an immense role model. But yeah, like for some reason that made, thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Tuna pickles.
You're gonna.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Can you, Sarah? Do you mind after you pour Robin his refill of coffee, if you're okay with it? Because I love hearing the description. Would you mind just telling us what this is that you brought us?
Tuna pickled gilda, yes. So it's a little bit of gilda. Essentially means like lollipop, and it's a tuna in the center, albacore tuna, lightly sous vide in olive oil, surrounded by very tasty pickles, Gandia chilies, manzanilla olives, a little bit of olive oil just on there as well, a bit of shallots as well.
It's a tuna lollipop.
It is a tuna
It's
lollipop.
a tuna lollipop. Okay, I'm gonna have to take a picture of that, like to put with the blog post I put with this
Sweet.
thing. How do you eat a tuna lollipop? I guess we're gonna find
you
out.
Eat it like separately.
That's what you said. It's
I take it all
juicy.
apart.
You
Yeah.
said it's juicy.
Yeah.
Okay. That was a really healthy and positive distraction because now my mouth is watering.
Mm-hmm.
So this book totally, I love that. Introduced my mind to the subjective.
Yeah.
And is it worth talking about now what that did for you later, or is it worth it to pause and go to the next book?
Well, to be honest, embarrassingly, is that it makes sense why I chose the other two books, and I'm very much a believer in nurture versus nature, and maybe there was something in me that allowed me to interpret that interaction the way I did, but it definitely opened up my eyes to always seeking for truth or a certain perspective in every sort of interaction. So that's, I guess, why I lean towards books by people like Michel Foucault and Deborah Lupton more than I lean to, I don't know. Like, I do love Margaret Atwood, but I'm not a really big fiction reader.
How do people learn to do that?
I don't know. But I'll tell you, spending 8 years in University of Toronto and studying social theory, maybe that's why I ended up there. But there was a lot of people similar to me, and we had amazing conversations around those two books.
Thank you for not revealing the titles yet.
Yeah.
Well, it's also related to me to what you said at the beginning about this bar, being open to the gray, the nuance, the subjectivity, the idea that it can be when you walk in, what people want is what they want. That's why you challenged me the first time I ordered a drink from you. You were like, well, no, what do you want, Neil? What do you want? And I was like, I don't know, like optimistic, refreshing. And I went on these adjective rant, and you were like, that's what nobody does.
Yeah.
Because you're trying so desperately to curate an experience that is unique for the individual, and even the individual's different instances. And seeing that level of gray, never mind serving that level of gray, is so difficult.
Those are the muscles.
Oh, that just arrived?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about, I've never had these before. What was your name?
Andrea.
Andrea, can you tell us what you just brought us?
Yeah, they're grilled mussels. They are brushed with a reduced mussel stock and topped with an onion and red pepper medley.
What's that? Is that cream on them, or is that just the mussels, like this stuff?
That's literally the mussel.
That's literally the mussels, yeah.
And then it's like lemon on the side that you sprinkle. Okay, I can't wait to try this. Thank you for being willing to tell us what that is. You're a seafood guy, clearly.
Yeah, I don't eat a lot of land animals.
Interesting.
I actually don't eat a lot of seafood, but
we're gonna get into that with one of your books. But that is so. Just to finish that thought, I do think that seeing that level of gray and those level of layers, never mind serving it, is a very, very difficult task. Partly why this place is successful, but also a skill that I think all of us, I know me especially, like I need to grow that. My podcast doesn't tailor itself to the listener in any way. My books don't. They're clearly from my mind distilled into a pile of paper. If you resonate with it, great. That's for you. But I can't do that in the work I do.
Yeah, and restaurants are very unique because we're selling products, but it's the only place where you're selling products that people have a chance to taste and try. Like, you can't go into a retail store, put on a t-shirt, take it home, wear it for a week, and then bring it back and be like, I want a larger size, or I want a different color now. Whereas you're at a restaurant, you don't like a drink, you send it back. You don't like a dish, you send it back. It's a very unique form of... Oh, dope!
Why did you just scream oh dope?
Because we have gluten-free bread available today, which makes me very happy. So we have the tomato bread, which is...
Wait, have you not been able to eat this?
This is a new thing.
No, but for years you own this bar.
Yeah, I know, it's weird, right?
And you can't eat your own...
Well, I told you ego is a terrible thing.
What do you mean?
I had chefs in the past who said no to gluten-free bread because they didn't have the space. Well, I got great chefs now who are willing to open up to new options to make people happy. So...
Agency, control, nuance, layers, subjectivity.
Well, just because I'm the owner, I'm not going to force people to do things they don't want to do, but it's nice when I have staff who are willing to be a little bit more open. So I'm really...
That's something interesting you just said there. Just because I'm the owner, I'm not going to tell people what to do. What do you mean by that? Because I asked you at the beginning of this call before we press record, could you make me a drink? And you said, absolutely not. I'm not working. I'm not. Yeah. That would be disrespectful.
Yeah, Ashley's there. He's totally capable of making a drink.
That would be disrespectful to step on his toes.
Yeah.
What do you mean? I'm just because of the owner, I'm not going to tell people what to do. What does that mean?
My role isn't dictatorship, or my role is to give a safety net for people to succeed. I'm here to empower them, not to exert power over them.
Good transition to our next book, which is Food, the Body, and the Self by Deborah Lupton. Comes out from Sage Publications in 1996. Deborah Lupton is the Centenary Research Professor at the Faculty of Arts and Design at the University of Canberra, Australia. How do you say Canberra? I don't know either. Sorry, Australians. We should ask your bartender now. He's Australian, isn't he? Her research spans sociology and media and cultural studies. She's the author and co-author of 15 books. This is a green hardcover book with an oil painting on it of a farmer's market table of mangoes, tomatoes, oranges, pears, and blueberries. File this, Dewey guys, under 394.1 under General Customs, Eating and Drinking. Based on the back of the book, it says, in this wide-ranging and thought-provoking analysis of sociocultural and personal meanings of food and eating, Deborah Lupton explores the relationship between food and embodiment, the emotions and subjectivity. She includes discussion of the intertwining of food, meaning, and culture in the context of childhood and the family, as well as gendered social construction of food stuff, food tastes, dislikes, and preferences. Even the dining out experience, spirituality, and what we call the civilized body. This is a deep philosophical masterwork all about our relationship with eating and ourselves. Robin, tell us about your relationship with Food, the Body, and the Self by Deborah Lupton. And keep chewing your tomato bread because it looks delicious. I'm going to start biting into mine as you keep going.
Yeah. Sorry, just now I'm like mentally transformed back to U of T, 21 years old or so. Like first 2 years at U of T, I was in phys ed and kinesiology, and I wanted to be a chiropractor or study something biophysical. A lot of my colleagues wanted to be doctors. Everyone was very attracted to the science, but there were three kind of paths in my faculty alone where you went to the biophysical and studied, kinesiology, how the body moves, sciences, how your insides move, and the biophysical stuff. And then there's a psychosocial, which is, about sports related, how athletes, cope with retirement, training, overtraining,
sports psychology.
Exactly. But basically, yeah, the psychological implications of athleticism and the body, right? Study of the body. And then there's the sociocultural, which is what the longer I spent at U of T, the more I became interested in, which, now I finally realized might have been sparked by this whole Amazing Spider-Man epiphany as a child. But I then realized that I would definitely like to focus on the sociocultural aspect of health rather than the biophysical side of health, because I don't necessarily care about an individual and their health as much as I care about healing mass groups of people or understanding how certain pockets of society function and live and breathe. And Deborah Lupton's writing, and it's not just this book. This book was essential to my master's, and it was essential to...
What's your master's in?
Unfortunately, exercise science. But it's basically social theory of health. But it's an MSc, which is super weird. So yeah,
not super weird, super interesting.
Yeah. But it definitely was more on the sociocultural side than studying health and whatnot. But I spent a lot of time in the public health department, understanding macro level behaviors and studied media and stuff like that. But this book definitely started to excite me because Deborah was talking about, how my lack of vocabulary spending so much time away from university is how you assume certain genders and sexes are playing a role in food, and you're not even aware of it. It's like rice companies market their products based on the assumption that the nuclear family is an existing thing, and it should be something that exists. And Deborah Lupton very, I think, professionally and subtly starts to dismantle that in this book. And her later books start to be a little less subtle. But it was my first time hearing someone say something I had felt my whole life, which is why...
Can you open up that rice thing for us a bit? What do you mean they're marketed towards the nuclear family existing, or what do you?
I don't have any examples about, certain ad campaigns. I mean, let me think of stuff. Well, I guess, marketing during post-industrial revolution, there was a lot of advertising for how to cook at home and TV dinners and the minute rice and the ease for the mom to not have to spend so much time cooking, and the mom will be happy and the kids will be happy and everyone eats together, with the assumption that A, everyone can afford to share dinner together. B, there's 2 kids and 2 parents.
There's a togetherness.
B, that one woman, one man, and children are the norm. And the most fucked up thing is that the mom is responsible for the cooking of the dinner. And these are things that my parents and their parents accepted. Not only accepted, but celebrated. And I just didn't really vibe with it. I didn't understand it. And reading this sort of opened me up to the fact that the world doesn't have to be the way that I don't like. And there are other people who think like me, who see other options and so this was what, when I started in university, this is when I was 21, and I was like, holy fuck, there's a whole doctrine of scholars who have been writing down things that I've been thinking, in the back of my mind, which I've been trained to ignore. Wow. So this was the first time where I was like, maybe I'm not a biophysical kind of person. Maybe I should be studying more social theory. And this was the first book where I actually enjoyed reading something as academic as this.
Can you just define social theory for me for a second? I do have some great questions from this, but what is social theory? Just how people live?
Yeah, there's many social theories.
Okay.
Like Marx, Weber, Michel Foucault. These are pronounced very.
But what is
famous.
Social theory? I just don't understand that phrase. Maybe it's just me not.
I guess it's as opposed to psychological or whatever. Is that people? I don't know.
How people live or something like that. Okay, well, we'll have to look that up after.
Sure.
Page 29 of this book. Oh, by the way, page 28, because you just mentioned the thing about how you don't eat much. Did you say land animals? Or did you say animals at all? Because there's page 28 of this book. I wrote this quote down because it stuck out for me. Consuming the muscle flesh of other highly evolved animals is a potent statement of our supreme power.
Yeah. Same with agriculture. Sorry. But it was also, this book was fun because people don't realize that if you're vegan or vegetarian, you complain about exerting power over animals. It's not just that murder is unethical. It's we also exert power over plants, and we have been for thousands and thousands of years. We manipulate plants to do what the fuck we want. So if you really have issues with morality, like you should be foraging and then living in the bush, but we don't do that. As soon as we stopped being a hunter-gatherer society, we exerted our cerebral cortex power over plants and we manipulated them for our own benefit. So we've been doing this for a long time. So it goes all the way back to then, that farming is a social construct. We've created it. It's not a real thing. Streets, plants, TV dinners, these don't actually exist. And this was the first time I kind of opened up. So yeah, I don't know if I can.
Asher, right?
Ashley, how do we pronounce Canberra?
Oh yeah, because you're Australian,
University
right?
of Canberra.
We're just
Canberra.
Canberra. Thank
Great.
you for making sure we both were wrong. I feel
Thanks,
better
Zach.
that we were both wrong about that.
Yeah, I've never heard that.
Canberra. That makes a lot more sense. So that's amazing. I didn't even think of that. I never thought of that. Actually, maybe what you're against is manipulation of species. In which case you should, as you said, go be foraging completely. How are you supposed to do that?
It was just fun to sort of question everything that
Yeah.
you're trained as a young kid to
You're just going
accept.
deeper and deeper into what Tim Urban, who was a guest on a previous chapter of the show, would call first principles. Like getting back into like, where is the assumption? What's below that? Where's the assumption? What's below that? Where's the assumption? What's below that? Page 29, here's another one. It's another assumption on cultural barriers. On page 29 of this book, Food, the Body, and the Self. She says, many foods are classified as edible or inedible just through cultural understandings and norms. For example, the consumption of their own mother's milk by infants is considered highly appropriate. But the consumption of other women's milk to infants is not, even though that's edible. And also, neither is older children to suckling breast milk. Like if your kid's 5 and he's breastfeeding, that's considered highly inappropriate.
Yeah.
And then she keeps going on this rant. It's a good rant. She's like, eggs with bacon, we consider fine. Eggs with jam, we consider gross. Eggs with cockroaches, also edible, we consider completely disgusting. Why? Like, it's just, again, like, it's mind-blowing. And here I am, by the way, eating mussels and tuna. Like, this is food. Honestly, I got to be honest, I probably didn't eat much of this stuff, if at all, but for coming here, you guys have helped me branch out of, I guess, assumptions I had about food. How do people learn how to do that? Especially in regards to food, Rob, because we're in your restaurant here. How do people learn to branch out from a palate point of view? Let's start there, just with what we eat.
How do people learn?
To branch out. And why should we? Growth. You know, we eat 3 times a day at least. This is an opportunity for curiosity and
there you
creativity.
go. Who eats 3 times a day? I don't.
Exactly.
Do you? Does everyone? Like, we were trained because of TV and commercials to eat 3 times. So that's essentially what Deborah's getting at. It's like, what is the purpose of eating? Why are we feel guilty about certain practices and not about other practices? It's because of certain social norms that you're used to and you're forced upon, and that make things okay. So it's okay to, like, if someone's nursing at age 3 and they're doing something wrong, they're taboo, they don't be friends with them, but that has nothing to do with health. And just to like how I formed this was my master's thesis was about the whole so-called obesity epidemic, where people just believe that everyone was getting fatter and worse enough that body image or the way someone looked had a direct correlation with health, which it doesn't. So these assumptions were great that she was smashing, and they're pretty, like, they're not super morbid, right? Like the jam versus bacon and mother's milk versus not. That's not as harmful as seeing someone who you might consider overweight because of a Calvin Klein ad and assuming that they're less healthy than the person in the Calvin Klein ad, when in fact, people who are anorexic have a tendency to have far more body fat and insanely more, higher rates of mortality and morbidity. So someone who looks what society deems unpleasurable might actually have way more health benefits or be healthier in general. So it's why
I love the example of the oil paintings of 100 years ago. It's like, people, when you had weight on you, you were wealthy, you were well fed, you were,
Well, it's actually so funny too, because this picture of the oil painting is like, this is what food was, right? This was fast food. You just bite into an apple or an orange, you grab a fig and a whole fistful of blueberries.
You're talking about the oil painting on the cover of the book.
Yeah, but who has access to that? Like not everyone has access to that, but that's fast food. And then, fast forward 100 years, you're what's acceptable is hyper processed food, cheese in plastic, and the grocery store, and that whole like new interaction, how we get it, which is essential and it's important to exist in society, and things is, so it's okay. We have grocery stores and that allows millions of people to eat and exist alongside each other. But why are we doing certain things? Why are we packaging things 6 times? Why are we, where are the food coming from?
Totally
Why are we
agree.
flying it in from Chile or Ontario? Like, but it's just funny. I think it's what you would, if she were to do an oil, no one's going to do an oil painting of, the aisle at Loblaws with the no frill, like everything packaged and in
Right.
boxes, right? Because we've changed the way we eat.
So you are so deeply knowledgeable in this subject. Give me a couple go-dos for me, the casual eater. I'm a person who loves food. I think most of us listening do, and I love eating. Give me some simple ways to be more mindful and intentional about how I'm consuming food. Like what are some simple steps? What
I'm
do I
not
do
here to say like there's a best practices for eating food. I do enjoy that Homari Cantu, rest in peace, was a chef in Chicago who was doing a lot of scientific stuff with food. He was the one who
Sorry, who was that?
Homari Cantu.
Omari Cantu was
Yeah,
a chef.
he died a few years ago. I don't remember why, but very young. He's extremely young. It was very sad, but he was working with NASA to help solve the food famine, or the imminent food famine, which he was like it's kind of conspiracy theory, but like he thinks food at one point will decrease, and that if you are in a certain socioeconomic status, that you should be able to buy something for $2-3. It has a list of all the nutritions you need and what you have, and you eat a bar, and it like literally, because his menu was edible at one of his very fancy restaurants. It was like $1,000 a plate to like get into his restaurant. But his famous thing was he had edible print. So he would print his whole menu and you can eat it, and it was like a certain flavor, but also insane nutrients.
You could
Like,
eat the menu itself.
you could eat the menu itself, yeah.
Inspector Gadget-ish thing.
So
like
he was working with NASA. I don't know what's happened with that, about NASA, NASA.
Let's get Ash back out here.
Yeah, NASA, the space program to develop like edible food, edible print, so that like if you only had X amount of income, what would be the most bang for your buck to survive? So he looked at food from a survival standpoint. So I don't really want to talk about best practices. I think food is amazing. I think if you're going to eat something you enjoy, pick the restaurants that don't treat you shitty and use good stuff. Obviously, we're all aware of the globe and what's changing, and where we should focus our attention on. But I think it's just the fact that you do question where things come from and why you do certain things and who's worthy of your money and whatnot. But back to like changing your palate. Most people don't have a need to expand their palate until there is a need. Like the whole eating a cockroach, like you better believe if you're hungry, I'll eat the fuck out of a cockroach. Like I'll eat bugs. I have, friends who like get grossed out when they see a whole cricket on a menu. But, if they're fed it in powder form, which is, like in Mexico, they don't really eat whole crickets. They take them, they dehydrate them, and they blitz them up, and they just use them as salt. It's seasoning, but it's also pure protein, because crickets are whatever they eat.
They're in protein bars.
Yeah,
now.
So I have friends who are like, oh yeah, like cricket powder protein. I was like, no. Powder protein, that is crickets. They're 100% protein. So it's just blitzed up crickets, bud. It's just not a whole cricket anymore.
Wait, what are you talking about? I mean that in a good way. Wait, crickets are what they eat?
Yeah, apparently. Like if you feed a cricket blue-green algae for 3 days, they're basically blue-green algae. If you feed them dog shit, you're basically eating dog shit. Yeah.
So what do they eat?
Whatever you feed them. Like you can farm them.
They're like us walking in here. They have agency. They have an intentional purpose of what they're...
And usually eat grass, I guess. But yeah, I remember my palate was crap until I was a broke student working all the time, and I literally ate whatever was in front of me. So I think what Lupton's what she alludes to very well is people assume that what is normal in North America based on our industry is what's normal elsewhere. And that's so fucked up.
What do you mean when you say people don't expand their palate until they need to? What does that mean?
If you're
I get why people don't expand it. So who needs to then? Is it just
I mean, you don't need to at all.
Right. It's just a
If
function of having
if you have
means,
access to
kinda.
the few things you eat all the time and you're happy, in your little food bubble, why the hell you don't need to try anything else? But if you want to expand because you enjoy flavors, you will. Great. But not everyone, including myself, I didn't eat anything. But once I was forced to, because I was at the food bank and feeding myself in university and whatnot, and I started to find out how delicious all these things were. And now I will literally try anything, which is not how I was when I was a young kid.
Is there anything because I do shop, even on your menu here, and I think it's gone now. I think Sarah probably took it back. But like even though I've been coming here for years now, and this is a place I feel very connected to this place, as people can probably tell. There's many things on the menu. I'm like, oh, I can't do that, can't do that, like can't do that. I'm like, I'm scared of a lot of things. I'm like, what is that? And then they're like, oh, that's like head cheese, or like, what is that stuff?
Yeah.
I don't even know what these things are.
Yeah,
so
like
I don't jump in tripe,
brains and duck hearts
duck hearts.
Like
snail.
to us, it's just protein. Yeah, we forget sometimes that octopus, which we sell the most of here. We have two kinds of dishes with octopus here, and Grant sells it at Isabel and Kate Sal, and like octopus is kind of like a Toronto trend or phenomena or something like that. But we forget sometimes that octopus is adventurous for some people, because it's just so common.
It was for me,
yeah,
until I came here. Now I'm just basically sleep with octopus now.
Right.
Just kidding. This is good. There's so many things in here I wanted to unpack. Here's one. She uses this example on page 27 of cultural imperialism, and she uses, of course, McDonald's as the example. American kind of like cultural imperialism all over the place, and 100%. Even rural places in China, you can now get a Big Mac, right? So I'm like, I'm standing, of course, there's no chairs here, at Bar Raval, a Spanish restaurant. You're not Spanish, are you?
No.
Right. So where do you stand on this idea of cultural appropriation when it comes to food? Can Neil Pasricha, an East Indian guy, open a sushi restaurant? What are the rules? How's that landscape changing? What's the word on that?
I have no idea. You should talk to an anti-oppression officer or someone who can speak more to that. Cultural appropriation to me is when people use someone else's culture and to solely benefit without giving anything back. Again,
I agree.
Yeah, we're not a Spanish restaurant. We're inspired by Antoni Gaudí and the restaurants and bars in Spain. We're a Toronto
People
restaurant.
do, though, right? Like, you drive by 3 Indian restaurants. One's run by all Indian people. One's run by all white people. One's run by all Chinese people. Which one do you go to? People are like, oh, this one's authentic. It's Indian restaurant run by Indian people. They must have brought the recipes from their village. People make these guessworks in their head.
Well, authentic isn't necessarily what I would use. Like, I think authenticity versus quality is an important debate, and people always argue like, oh, well, this is how they make a Negroni in Italy. It's like, well, drinks in Italy suck. So why don't I just take that and improve on it? It's not necessarily going to be better. So authenticity, sure, if that's your goal, you might be into a crap meal. But yeah, I think in Toronto, we benefit from having Moroccan restaurants owned by people from Morocco, whereas or Vietnamese restaurants owned by people from Vietnam. I know a lot of Japanese restaurants are owned by Koreans, but you know what? If they have a tasty restaurant and they're not doing anybody harm, I'm not going to say that they're appropriating a culture that's not theirs.
It's not. You wouldn't compare it to what she's talking about with McDonald's and all that stuff.
I don't think restaurants are a major violent culprit of cultural appropriation. Unless you have it blows my mind that like the Cleveland Indians and the Atlanta those are still logos that exist. Like that shit blows my mind. And
because of tradition, and tradition is tradition according to the same shower thought subreddit that I'm addicted to. Tradition is dead people peer pressuring us.
Fucking hell, man. I think tradition to me is a 4-letter word, and this is not the first time I've said this on camera recording. Tradition's a 4-letter word to me. Tradition has my ancestors murdered in millions and millions by Germans. Tradition has homosexuals fearing for their lives and staying in the closet. Like, fuck that shit. So the reason why, and to segue to the next book, is Michel Foucault opened my mind to realizing that things should absolutely not be the way they are if it harms people and it's immoral. If it's immoral and it's inequitable and unsustainable, we need to oppose it. Not just, be fine with it or turn an eye. We need to oppose anything like that. And again, if someone's offended the fact that we serve pinchos and have an Antoni Gaudí design here, I'm super open to the discussion. But, again, we don't claim to be Spanish or authentic or whatever. This is a place for Torontonians to enjoy and escape without having to fly 6 hours east or whatever it is. So, I don't. So what was it was about authenticity?
Oh, I was gonna. You're going on it. You're riffing on it perfectly. I was gonna keep going, but do you want to transition?
No,
to
it was the imperialism. Sorry, the culinary
Yeah.
imperialism. Cultural imperialism. So I think McDonald's and Starbucks are a great example of that, where North American quick service has definitely infected or was infecting all points of the globe for quick, easy, fast food. But I would love, and again, I don't have the luxury to read things that I want to read because I am a business owner now. So I find that being very selfish.
This being one of many, many, many restaurants you run.
Yeah,
now.
so what I have to do is I spend most of my day making sure everyone's okay, and I learn from my staff because hopefully they have time to read stuff like this. But no, I'm definitely out of the loop. But I'd love to know what proponents in this stuff are saying because of the recession of Starbucks and McDonald's around. Like there's some imperial resistance now, and things are getting a little bit more local because of the knowledge that we finally have of how that culture of imperialism is destroying the world.
Even just that word local wasn't a word I ever heard connecting to food when I was a child, as a teenager, when I was in college. That word, even just local, is kind of a newer word. Yeah. The idea that it's a good thing that we should try to get things. 100-mile stores are more popular now. These stores that only source food and things from within 100 miles of them.
You hear like farm to table and local.
Exactly.
But when that first started, it was unique. But now it should be a given. It's like, what is we have good food and good drinks. It's local. It's farm to table. It's like that sentence now means nothing to me. It
funny.
Should be local. It should be good. It should be. It's of course it goes from a farm to a table. What do you like? What else is this? Is that comes from a laboratory to a floor?
Well, that it's so funny you say that because I had a friend visiting up from Boston, and she said, "Hey Neil, what's the best farm to table restaurant in Toronto?" I'm like, "I think I know Toronto restaurants pretty well." I couldn't think of one, and I'm like, "It's actually maybe because of what you're saying." I'm like, you and a lot of the people running great restaurants in the city, they're all that way. Like they're all. It's actually that's why I couldn't think of one off the top of my head. Hey, how are you? We're good. No.
We just did a spinning class together about an hour ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, sorry, my name's Amanda.
Robin.
Nice to finally actually
How's it
meet
going?
you.
And Neil, we've talked before. We're recording the podcast right now. These are Robin's. These are Robin's 3 books right here. I'm about to reveal the 3rd one on the air. Can we do it?
Sure.
Okay. Good to see you, Amanda. And now that you've done spinning class, what are you gonna have? Exactly, everything. And as I started that sentence, I was like, I'm going somewhere problematic. As I started that sentence, I was gonna say, now you've had spinning class, eat whatever you want. But then I'd be like, you're gonna ratchet me across the head for like 7 judgments I'm making.
What a cute interruption after talking about cultural imperialism.
How do you mean?
I don't know. It's just really funny.
So say why?
We just did spinning class and we're talking about Starbucks. It's great. No, it's great.
Discipline and Punish is your 3rd book. Discipline and Punish: The Birth of the Prison.
This should be required reading in grade 3.
Oh my gosh, this was a hard book though. It's published by Edition Gallimard from Paris in 1975, written by Michel Foucault. He was a French philosopher, a historian of ideas, a social theorist, there it is again, and a literary critic. Foucault's theories primarily address the relationship between power and knowledge. That's a thinker on its own, and how they are used as a form of social control through societal institutions. Michel Foucault lived from 1926 to, sadly, 1984. He was the first public figure in France to die of AIDS. The cover of this book is a stark picture of just a wooden ruler, 3 dimensions. File this in Dewey Decimal, folks, in 365 under penal and related institutions. The plot is very compelling. Let me just read it really quickly from the back of the book. Barely 250 years ago, a man condemned of attempting to assassinate the King of France was drawn and quartered in a grisly spectacle that suggested an unmediated duel between the violence of the criminal and the violence of the state. It talks a lot about people getting tortured for weeks and all this stuff. This groundbreaking book compels us to reevaluate our assumptions about all the ensuing reforms in the penal institutions of the West. He examines innovations that range from the abolition of torture to the institution of forced labor and the appearance of the modern penitentiary, ultimately suggesting, and here's the thesis, everyone, that we have merely shifted the focus of punishment from the body to the soul. Tell us about your relationship, Robin, with Discipline and Punish, The Birth of the Prison by Michel Foucault. That's Foucault.
Yeah. So Michel Foucault, I didn't know, like when I first started reading this for one of my graduate courses, I hated it. I know, through reputation, everyone told me how hard it was to understand his ideas and whatnot. But the more you read his books and the more you open up, you start to realize that he's simply using certain case studies to highlight his point of, systems exist to serve power, and he likes to address how that came to be. And then his point is probably it shouldn't have come to be. But he definitely shows how they work, and the take home from Discipline and Punish was, besides the fact, like, opening up my mind even further to a more specific example of how we've been herded to listen to people, to adopt norms. Like, the fact that norms exist is a normative way of thinking, and that, we give power to people in certain positions, therefore believe what they have to say. And, the education system, the penal system, the food system, right? Like, we just allow them to exist, which gives power to it. And Michel Foucault's writing and his books were the first where I was like, this is a specific way to oppose something, again, that I had been sort of twinkling in the back of my head. I was like, this doesn't seem right. And it was definitely a brain opener for me. It's so mixed feeling, because it's some of the most painful parts of my life, having to ingest this stuff and then
And the
write
book itself
exams
is
on
quite,
it.
the book itself is like, it opens with like essentially 20 pages of torture scenes from the 15, 16, 1700s. He points out it's not too long ago, but the grisly, like we torture people till purposely so they wouldn't die over weeks in public squares. And he's like, that was us. That's the people that's your brain and my brain. We did that not too long ago.
Yeah.
And we loved it.
And
they still do public killings in many countries.
But what's worse? This is why I think I think that was the point, is like, what's worse? Grisly tearing someone limb from limb who did a bad act, or putting them to work and absorbing everything that they mean as a human.
Chain gangs, you mean?
Like, or
the idea of making them build
penitentiaries, buildings, like slave labor, like all that stuff. Like, what is a prison? Is it worse to brutally harm someone's physical body, or is it worse to enslave someone's soul and mind? And the one thing I really remember, and I'll never get out of my mind, and I think about it every time I see a camera, or every time I see people post selfies on Instagram, is the whole idea of the panopticon. The panopticon is basically a self-maintained prison, which gave the illusion to the inmates that, how like elephants are trained at a young age with a chain around their leg, and then when they get bigger, like, you literally just have a string around their ankle with a small little wooden peg, and the elephant could easily rip that thing out of the ground, but they don't, because they're trained at such a young age to expect pain when they pull on the peg. Well,
it's like the metaphor of the gorillas in the room, and if you shower them with water enough times, then as the gorillas turn over generation after generation, none of them will ever try to get the thing I forgot to mention, the pile of bananas hanging from the roof. It's like it's like this scientific study / metaphor of like, if you train people, even in an organization, to do something one way for some time, then forever they will say it's done this way. So no one will ever test the screws of it again. No one will ever push. The elephant will not pull the string away, even though they could break it, because they've been taught from a young age that they can't.
So the panopticon was this weird shape, and it's really difficult to discuss, but everyone can Google it at home.
Spelling?
Oh my gosh. P-E-N-A or P-E-N-O-P-T-I-C-O-N. Panopticon.
Okay.
Just like how it sounds.
Open it up for us.
It's essentially a few cells situated lower than this peak observation tower, which you then read sometimes has no one in it. So whether the inmates wanted to escape or leave, they always assumed that someone was in there because they couldn't see who was in there. So sometimes you'd have someone in there, shoot or whip them or harm them, and then eventually you didn't have to. So you basically had inmates maintaining themselves or keeping them within their limits. So there's different.
No resource expenditure.
It kind of becomes a metaphor for observation and you know, do we give to charity because we think people are watching us? You know, how do we mute our actions based on the assumption that someone's judging or viewing us, or, you know, do you do your hair or put on something different because you're trying to attract someone who broke up with you years ago, or you're trying to attract someone who you haven't even spoken to yet? Like, you have this self-manipulation based on some fucked up, non-existent form of observation from someone.
What does this have to connect this back to me to the surveillance cameras and the Instagram selfies?
Yeah, everyone's trying to emit this image with the false assumption that people are watching. But unfortunately, Michel Foucault died long before Instagram, so he kind of it kind of does exist now. But like, who cares? Who cares what people think when they see you or your photos? Like, Instagram started as like a place to show photos, and then it became a place to show yourself. So it proves him right. It proves that people.
And the ultimate joke you're saying is maybe no one's watching.
Well, if you care about what people think, are you free or are you in this panopticon? Are you imprisoned? So again, like, that's just the main part of this book. But what he did was, again, further open at least my mind to questioning everything and why things exist. And it was the first time I really understood like a social contract, or, you know, like, yeah, human construct. Like, you know, like, we stop at a red light and we go at a green light, and you don't think anything of it.
We exchange pieces of paper,
But
we
if
call it currency.
You drive on one side of the road, but in another country you drive on the other. Like, these are all made up rules that don't exist, but we adopt them. And why do we need them? And
sometimes we do need them. We need red and green lights.
we do and we don't. We do and we don't. If we really embrace technology, would we need a green light?
You know what? A professor
Or
of finance of mine at Harvard showed me a video once, showed the whole class a video of this extremely full and busy intersection in India, which had no stop lights at all, or traffic lights. And it was everyone going in every direction on bikes and mopeds and cars and buggies and walking. And he showed the video and he's like, no one ever, it's like the least accidents of
'cause
any
you're actually paying
intersection.
attention.
Exactly.
Well, that's one part, but my whole thing is, every time you see all these signs: no parking, no stopping, slow down, don't drink and drive, don't smoke until you're 19. These are all rules put on because of a lack of state influence. If cars drove themselves, you could drive drunk because you're not literally behind the wheel. Like, if computers, we finally embrace technology, or like, we wouldn't have to have all these rules. We wouldn't have to have all these laws. Laws are, in my opinion, a way to correct the flaws in state governance, and it kind of like, you drive a certain speed because we don't trust people to go faster. But there are flaws, there are weaknesses.
This is so interesting, this sort of teeter-totter or seesaw between trust and control, because I've been thinking and studying trust a lot. The United States, here's a quote that has been checked out factually to be true. It's from a Hillary Clinton campaign speech at Columbia University a long time ago. The quote says, "It's a stark fact that the United States has less than 5% of the world's population, yet we have almost 25% of the world's total prison population. The numbers today are much higher than they have ever been more than 30 years ago, 40 years ago, despite the fact that crime is at its lowest ever level." I looked into this research-wise. The U.S. has almost 1% of its population incarcerated. It has both the highest number and the highest percentage of incarcerated people of any country in the world. Again, just pure number, and also as a percent of the population of any country in the whole world. And I say control and trust because, like the intersection in India, no controls, but a super high amount of trust and very low accidents.
Yeah.
How does that come to place in the world today?
I am so not the authority to comment.
Oh, no,
on
I know. We're just
the
having a
US
chit chat.
the
That's what this
US,
podcast is all about. It's trying to get interesting
incarceration.
people talking about interesting things. I'm never going to put you on a pedestal and say, like,
But
Robin says and he's the boss.
From
But
a
give me your thoughts. I want your
Canadian
brain.
uneducated opinion, I think, let's say if we weren't talking about the U.S. the United States of America's specific incarceration issue. We're talking about some country and a really weird, shitty problem. I think that country should reevaluate whether or not they're putting away people who are, in fact, criminals, quote unquote, or, not good people, or if they should reevaluate how they're treating the majority of the society who look a certain way. I think it's definitely stems from, it's from systemic hardcore racism, and they're, to be honest, there's the traditional word again.
You're agreeing with chapter 26 of 3 books, which is Angie Thomas.
Yeah.
She wrote The Hate You Give. She's talking a lot about this right now.
So maybe if they really weren't racist and open to empowering people, maybe they would realize that, okay, this is our problem, not these individuals' problem. And if we fix something about how we govern our land, maybe less people need to be locked up and put away. Because at that point, when you have those kinds of statistics, you should question yourself. You should question what you're doing, and look at there's so many other countries in the world that have way less harsh rules, way more, way less people locked up, and to be honest, a much more narrow income gap. So there's ways to change it,
and maybe safer.
Yeah, but exactly, they're not asking those questions, and are people,
We think by putting people away, we're solving the problem or challenge of safety. Actually, what you're saying, and actually what Foucault is saying in this book oftentimes is that actually often creates the problem itself.
Yeah.
That's so big a thought that I can't quite get my head around it. Like, my head's hurting just even trying to contemplate that. But there's something meatier there that I'd love to explore further in conversation with you, kind of outside of this chat, or just as I read more.
Maybe
and
a
get
little
more
lighter,
informed
instead
here.
of talking about racism and whatnot and incarceration.
As the sun, and by the way, as we were just talking, like the roof just peeled open our head. Now the sun is shining right on top of us. So it's lunchtime, I guess.
Well, how something like this applies to me is I never want my guests to feel like they're being pigeonholed, or their experience is being physically forced on them, or whatever forced. And I don't want my staff to feel like they need to go through a set of rules or sequence to please me or Grant. And it's I now am aware of this, I know of this, and I want to empower them. And if my staff make a mistake, or my guests don't bow down to our mahogany, our design and stuff like that, that's 100%
If they
okay.
order a vodka soda.
Where our governments lack in being humble, we should not, as individuals and as leaders that, or restaurant owners. Like, again, I don't really feel the desire to comment on incarceration and stuff like that. But no, you shouldn't. There's many different levels to which the panopticon can apply itself in society, and it can be in your job at the office, right? Is your manager looking from behind their wall into your cubicle because they can see you and you can't see them? So do you type away and hate your job because you feel that you don't want to displease someone who you don't fucking like? So there's many aspects to Michel Foucault's understanding. He just outlines the most horrific, straight up stuff that I think proves his point.
But it makes us all think and pause and wonder, and I'm thinking about it myself. What rules or constrictions or walls are we mentally placing on ourselves today that we may not even be aware of that influence how we act? What things can we dismantle and take away from ourselves so we can live a freer and more connected life?
Totally.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
That's it.
We can keep going if you want.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you. Hey everybody, it's just me. It's just Neil again. Did you love that conversation as much as I did? You could really feel the patio, which I kind of really liked. You could kind of feel that sun and that wind, and there's some birds in there, and the streetcars going by, and it was a bright sunny morning on the patio of, honestly, by far and away, my favorite bar in the entire world, Bar Raval, on College Street in downtown Toronto. Huge thank you to Robin Goodfellow for making the time to give us 3 books and to talk about them so openly with his incredible worldviews. I love so many quotes from Robin. Here's 3 I picked out. Just because I'm the owner, I'm not going to force people to do things they don't want to do. I'm here to empower them, not to exert power over them. how refreshing is that? And how sort of unconventional? That's not how it felt when I was kind of going up the ranks inside big corporate offices. And I'm sure it doesn't always feel that way to most people. But that was great. I'm here to empower them, not to exert power over them. Another one, tradition is a 4-letter word to me. Tradition has my ancestors murdered in the millions and millions by Germans. Tradition has homosexuals fearing for their lives and staying in the closet. Fuck that shit. And you couldn't see him, but he was like going for it. He was like a Tasmanian devil. He was like pumping his arms and fists. His eyes were kind of narrowing into, he was so passionate about that. And that is the type of passion that we need when we want to consume art that is unique and creative and different. And that's why his art is so it pops kind of out of the world, because he is so against this idea of tradition. Similarly, his ideas about authenticity versus quality, I thought were quite fascinating. And when we talked about cultural appropriation as it comes to restaurants, and I always try to pick 3 quotes. Here's my 3rd quote. I was going to go with some big, cerebral, heady quote about social theory or Michel Foucault, but I went with this one instead. Farm to table means nothing to me now. Of course it's farm to table. What else is there? Laboratory to floor? And that's a good point. Sometimes we come up with these words or phrases because they mean something unique at the time, and then you look back on them and you're like, yeah, shouldn't every good restaurant you go to be food from a farm? And shouldn't you be eating it on a table? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe Robin's missing something. Maybe we're all missing something. If we are, then give me a call. 1-833-READ-A-LOT. Let me know what we're missing. Huge thank you to Robin Goodfellow for giving us 3 more books to our top 1,000. He gave us number 924, The Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 1 by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Number 923, Food, the Body, and the Self by Deborah Lupton. And number 922, Discipline and Punish by Michel Foucault. And as always, if you want to see the full list of every single book we have talked about on the show, just head over to 3books.co. That's the number 3, BOOKS.co. And we have a little page at the top that you can click. There's lots of pages. There's the values, which I always talk about. No book shame, no book guilt, quit more to read more. You hear them sprinkled throughout the entire series, this entire show. But there's also our top 1,000. And so that is a quick high-level overview of every book we've discussed. And these 3 books will be added to that page right after I talk to you here. Okay? By the way, before we finish, I want to just give everyone a quick definition of social theory. This is something that Robin and I talked about in depth, but yet we had no working definition. So I went all around the internet. Most of the definitions are way too complicated for my pea brain to understand. But I found one over at the Oxford Biblio website, which really made sense to me. Social theory. Social theory refers to ideas, arguments, hypotheses, thought experiments, and explanatory speculations about how and why human societies, or elements and structures of human societies, come to be formed, come to change, come to develop over time, or disappear. And that is super high level and super macro. And of course, I don't have all those years of education that Robin does in social theory, but it helps me ground this entire conversation, especially things about, incarceration and how we think about eating and how we think about ourselves in relation to our food and all this stuff in a nice little term. It makes sense. It's how do we as people live? How did we used to live? How are we going to live? How do we talk about all of that at a higher level? And I think for sure, Robin did that with us today. Thank you so much again to Robin Goodfellow, the folks at Bar Raval for hosting us, Sarah, who was an incredible server, Ash, the incredible bartender, and everybody there for making Chapter 27 come to life. And now, if you've made it to this far in the podcast, it is time for the end of the podcast club. Yes, people, if you're listening, you know this show has no ads. We got no interruptions, no sponsors, no promotions, nothing. It's just content all the way to the end. And if you've made it this far, that means you're a super fan. You're listening to one of our 2 clubs for 3 books. One is the end of the podcast club. The other club you can only find out about by calling our number. I can't say more about it. It's entirely analog and through the mail. But what is our phone number? It is 1-833-READ-A-LOT. And as always, let's start off by going to the phones.
Hey, Neil. My name's Eric. I'm calling to you from Carmel, Indiana, a nice little suburb north of Indianapolis, Indiana. I have never been to South by Southwest, but every year I check YouTube for the latest awesome lectures from interesting people. Some I've heard of, some I haven't. And I came across your talk, and I loved it. And that's how I just came to learn about your podcast. And I started immediately last week, and I'm on episode 7 already. I've added a few books. Really appreciate the work that you're doing. I feel like you're a kindred spirit. I'm sure you hear that a ton. So it's nice to know that there are a lot of us kindred spirits out there. Love your work. Can't wait to catch up with all the episodes. 25 just dropped. And yeah.
Thank you so much to Eric from Carmel, Indiana. When you said Carmel, I was picturing California, and then you threw in Indiana afterwards and threw me for a loop. Eric, thank you for finding me through South by Southwest. What a funny way to find me. You know what? That was this year, 2019, was my first time ever being invited to give a keynote speech at South by Southwest. I really wanted to do a good job, so I wrote an entirely new speech, okay, like called Building Trust in Distrustful Times. And essentially, I almost killed myself. Like I worked like 100 hours probably in the week and a half leading up to it, coagulating all my notes from the last few years, writing the PowerPoint, writing the script, rewriting it, practicing it. My poor wife, my poor parents had heard it so many times. And I go on stage and I give this speech. And I couldn't believe what happened. I mean, it was 2,500 people, the standing ovation. It went over really well, luckily. And I mentioned it all. Why do I mention all that? Okay, I'm mentioning all that because you found me that way. But more maybe interestingly, Butterfly Effect, it relates back to Robin Goodfellow, and it relates back to 3 books. Because I wouldn't have fell in love with Bar Raval if it wasn't for Robin, as you could probably tell. And I wouldn't have met Vishwas Agrawal in chapter 7 of 3 books, The World's Greatest Uber Driver, if I hadn't have been at Bar Raval and walked out the door. That's where I was. I was at Bar Raval. I think in chapter 7 I said the bar. But now I can tell you which one. It's Bar Raval. And then I met Vish. We had this great conversation. That story's gone viral, okay? Number 2 article on Fast Company. Vish has been on TV. He's been on radio shows. Uber has been tweeting and sharing his story. Uber has invited Vish into their office to train kind of fellow drivers and to train their head office staff. Vish's story is continuing to go. And it's because of this show, because of Bar Raval too. And I mentioned all that because I then talked about Vish in the speech on building trust at South by Southwest. And so we're going to link to the video of me at South by Southwest in the show notes for this show, if you want to check it out, if you want to hear a story a little bit more about Vish and about 3 books, okay? I didn't even talk about the Paper Cut Club and things like that we have going for trust, but I did mention the fact that this show is trying its best to build trust with you. How? Well, we've got no ads. We've got no sponsors. We've got no interruptions. We've got a finite number of books, which means that we have a finite number of chapters, episodes, I was going to say. I think I said because I was trying to say chapters and episodes. We always believe that humans are the best algorithm. That was one of my themes kind of in the South by Southwest speech as well. That's why we always record live and in person, right? This chapter was done on a bar patio, but we've also been down to Key West, Florida, where we sat down with Judy Bloom in her bookstore. We have been to Chris Anderson of TED's kind of office. He gave us a funny word for that office name, the Jerka room, and in New York City. And we're heading all over the place. Went to Mitch Albom's radio station for chapter 15. David Sedaris's limo, right? We have been bouncing around. We believe that human connection can only be felt when it's in person, when it's connected kind of with this electric, invisible connections that we all have, that I certainly feel with you, Eric, but also with everybody else listening and interacting. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, this guy's head's gigantic. He's just been prattling on about how great he is, and he gave this big speech, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's bring it all back down, people. Let's poke a pin in it right now as we go to our letter of the chapter. Okay, this letter comes from Victoria, British Columbia. I will not say the person's name on the air, and you'll hear why as I read the letter. Hi, Neil. I love your podcast, 3 Books. It's great to hear many people from different walks in life and learn about their most formative 3 books. It's also wonderful that it's advertising free. One man mentioned we shouldn't complain about your podcast because you're doing it for free. Another woman gave you 1 out of 5 and you didn't know why. Well, I'll suggest a few things here. During the David Sedaris talk, you reminded David that he drew a penis in someone's book, along with his signature. I think, along with my husband and a few friends, that drawing a penis in someone's book is inappropriate. If I had waited in a long line and then David had done that to my book, I would have walked away. How can you/David think that's funny? I was surprised you didn't question him why he did it, rather than laugh along. I next listened to you with Tim Urban, where you and Tim thought it was funny that Trump and Putin had a penis measuring contest and how he drew that out on his own blog. I mean, I understand the analogy, but couldn't you have edited that out? Why is it that men like to talk about their penises? I listened again to the Debbie Stoller interview, the feminist interview, the founder of Bust magazine, to see if she had anything to say about vaginas or vulvas. To no avail. But I was reminded from the interview how the world seems to be all from a man's perspective. Amen. That's me saying amen, not her. Without any consideration that more than half of us are women. I am not expecting to hear a CBC talk, but I'm not expecting to hear about penises either, so perhaps things can change there. I heard you say XYZ on your show instead of XYZ. Are you selling out? Just because you want a worldwide audience doesn't mean you use the American language. Aren't you proud of your Canadian heritage? Don't you want to make sure there's a difference in our countries? Aren't you happier living in Canada compared to the States? What is wrong with sounding Canadian? If someone questioned it, it is a teachable moment. I will also weigh in on your intro music. I always fast forward through it. P.S. You don't need to read this on your podcast. However, she did not say not to read it, and because she asked it to be optional to be read, I thought I'd be respectful and just sort of take her name off. Although she put her full name on here, so I didn't know if I should take it off, but I thought, well, let's just be safe and not say it. There's a lot to learn here. There really is. Honestly, when I got the letter, I was like a bit stung, but then I think, you know what, you're making a good point. Debbie Stoller pointed out, right? This is Debbie Stoller, the founder and editor of Bust magazine, that the entire world is, you know, it's a patriarchy. So when you turn on the TV, you know, why does sports come on before the news? She was pointing out. And I get that. And so some of these penis jokes, I don't think I even hear them. Frankly, I don't even remember the Tim Urban one that I think he said. I don't remember doing a Putin joke myself. I don't know enough about Putin to make jokes about it. And then David Sedaris, you know what? That's a great point. I think partly for me, I'm with a hero, right? Like I'm with someone whose writing I've looked up to. I need to learn and grow my confidence in challenging heroes. Okay, I don't know how to say that better, but it's like, even if someone's a person that I've looked up to for years, I still need to be able to be comfortable to get into the nitty gritty. I try with my questions, but maybe I need to try harder. And maybe I need to say, maybe I need to go at guests a little stronger in a way that also doesn't prevent future guests from coming on the show. You know, it's not like I'm running Saturday Night Live here where we can do a takedown because, well, they're huge and 25 million people watch and there's no way that you would kind of trade in that publicity. Well, my show is a niche show. We are talking to an incredibly interesting and literate community around the world. Right as I speak right now, we are the number 26 podcast in the entire world, right? We're wedged right between Adam Grant's podcast and This American Life. People, we're number 26 in the whole world. Angie Thomas's chapter with us, chapter 26, is featured on the Apple carousel when you open the app. You know, people are texting me pictures all the time. Like, we're growing something huge for sure, but I also have to figure out the right balance. And so you're pointing that out. And as for XYZ or XYZ, I don't know. I don't know if I'm Canadian. I was born in Canada, but I also think like we're living in a global world now. And so now language is becoming global too. And honestly, it's one of those things where I don't discriminate. Like I just don't even hear the fact that I said XYZ versus XYZ. Although I think I actually just like Z better. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and which one would you finish that song with? Which one sounds better? Thank you so much for your letter. I always try to read provocative and interesting letters. I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the feedback. Okay, and now it is time for the word of the chapter. And maybe before we jump into the word, I just got to say, I am feeling like this crazy swirl of emotions, right? Like I'm recording this, I'm in my basement, and there's these, you know, it's kind of fun in a way to play a voicemail and a review that are juxtapositioned. You know what I mean? It's like one's really good, one's really bad. One's kind of, you're okay, one's like, you're not that good. And so I think I'm going to kind of try to keep doing that. There are far, far, far more like 5-star reviews and complimentary reviews than there are kind of people prickling at me. But the prickles are interesting, aren't they? Aren't they interesting to listen to? I find them interesting to read. So let me keep trying to do that. But now I'm interrupting myself. Let's get on with the word of the chapter. And for this, let's go back to Robin. Why didn't you just stuff in more napkins? And they said, that's not clean.
Yeah,
Like they were like you guys do
not
so much.
soigné.
It's not what?
Soigné.
What's that word?
I don't know. It's like a French restaurant slang for like
That might be the
extra
word.
nice, extra
That
awesome.
might be the word of the podcast.
Yeah, soigné.
Yes, indeed. It is soigné. How could we not resist the temptation to use that word? It is Soigné with an accent aigu on top. That's the accent that goes up and to the right. Soigné. And how do you pronounce it?
Soigné.
Soigné, dressed very elegantly, well groomed. That's not good enough definition. Let's head over to Merriam-Webster for a little bit more color. Google, you're too superficial, Google. You just got the high-level version of the world. I want to go to depth, and for that we go to Merriam-Webster. They've been around since 1828. We trust Miriam, whoever she is, and her husband Webster. Okay. Soigner comes from the French, where it serves as the past participle of the verb soigner with an R at the end, meaning to take care of. That's interesting, to take care of. It first appeared in English in the 19th century and can be used to describe such things as an elegant wardrobe, a fancy restaurant, or an extravagant meal that one might enjoy at such a restaurant. It can also be used to describe people, as in a recent article from the New York Times from, wasn't a recent, April 11th, 2004. Here's the article. It says, it's about fashion designer Donna Karan, Karan. And the article says, her name is really pronounced Karen, but people always said it with a glamorous continental inflection. It suited their image of a fashion designer, aloof, soigné, different from you and me. That reminds me of Target. Does that remind anyone else of that? You know, Target. That's very soigné. And we were talking about how at Bar Raval, they don't just stuff napkins in the napkin holder or fill up the toothpicks. They take the entire wooden contraption away and replace it within 1 second before you even notice. So many times at Bar Raval, I'm like, oh, my bill's been processed, or oh, my water's been filled. And I don't even notice that happening because they are so soigné. But now, is everyone kind of pro soigné? No. If you go online, you find some websites like firstwefeast.com, which says, soigné is a word mostly used by wannabe fine dining douchebags. Whoa, ouch. It means elegant in French, and it's used to describe an exceptionally sexy dish or when you really nailed a plating. Okay. So then you're like, okay, do I use that or do I not? But then David Chang, founder, overseer of Momofuku, a guy we'd love to have on 3 Books. Maybe we can reach out to David Chang. Wrote a huge essay about it for the New York Eater website. We'll link to this in the show notes as well. 12 years ago. And he said, soigné is the only French word I understand. You always hear it behind the scenes in restaurants. For servers, it means make sure the guests have everything they need. For cooks, soigné means make it perfect. He has a really long blog post where he talks about how, you know, if there's a food reviewer in the audience, in the seating area, or like a VIP or celebrity or something, then you want to make a soigné meal. So you use the choicest cuts, a center cut of côte de beef. I'm probably saying that wrong. The fattest diver scallops, the best of whatever's on the menu. And he tells a really funny story about how they got the table wrong and they gave kind of an average customer a soigné meal and they gave the food reviewer a normal meal. And that inspired him at Momofuku, at least 12 years ago, to do one soigné table a night. And he said it's debatable because some people say, shouldn't every table be soigné? And he's like, yeah, but for one table, we like to just give them surprise dishes that we're testing or like give them these gigantic scallops when nobody else can get them. And it's fun for the kitchen. Soigné. Remember I said before, it's better and more fun to learn about words when they're in the wild than when they're at the zoo. Robin used that word soigné, accent aigu, soigné, in the wild, and we thank him for teaching it to us today. And so now, here we are. This is a delight, you know. In that phone call we played from Eric, he said, you're a kindred spirit. Well, that's what I feel with all of you. I really do. And even the woman from Victoria, you know, you're a kindred spirit too, because you wouldn't care enough to challenge me and to sort of help the show get better if you didn't love it, right? That's the thing. It's like when you get into a fight with somebody, you're like, The reason I'm in a fight with you is because I care about you. I care about us. I care about this. I want this to be so good. And if I didn't, I would just walk away. I'd just get pissy and I'd leave. So keep the feedback coming. We love hearing it. You can call me anytime at 1-833-READ-A-LOT. Yes, I do listen to every single voicemail left. We do play one on every single show. And leave me a review, a letter, any way you want, on Twitter, on a YouTube comment, on an iTunes review. Send me an email. We are getting so much interesting feedback. I can't wait. I almost have too much to share with you, but we will continue to share one on every single end of the podcast club, on every single chapter of the show. Now, until next time, let's just remember our final words of advice, which are that you are what you eat and you are what you read. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.